Samir and Sarah had always believed they were good parents. Their home was filled with love, laughter, and everything their children could ever need. Aisha, their 16-year-old daughter, was a bright and independent girl. She excelled in school, had a small but close group of friends, and spent most of her time in her room, like any other teenager. Her younger brother Daniel was still in middle school, more interested in video games and cartoons than anything else. Life seemed normal, almost perfect. Technology had become an unavoidable part of their household. Tablets, laptops, and smartphones were as common as furniture. Samir often worked late at his office, and Sarah, though present at home, was usually busy managing household chores and scrolling through social media. They trusted their children to be responsible with their devices. Aisha had a phone since she was 13, and they had never felt the need to invade her privacy. After all, she was a good student, never got into trouble, and seemed happy. What could possibly go wrong? What they didn't realize was how much the world had changed. Unlike their own childhood where dangers were physical and visible, today's threats were silent, hidden behind screens, and far more deceptive. They assumed that because their daughter was at home, she was safe. But the reality was different. The first signs were subtle. Aisha became more withdrawn, spending longer hours in her room, her face often illuminated by the soft glow of her phone. She was always wearing headphones, lost in a world unknown to her parents. At dinner she barely spoke, responding with one-word answers or distracted nods. Sarah noticed her daughter's late-night online activity but dismissed it as harmless teenage habits. Samir, though less observant, sometimes felt something was off but brushed it away, reassuring himself that Aisha was just growing up. Parents often believe that if their child is home, safe within four walls, then nothing can harm them. They assume their child would never lie, never hide secrets, never walk into danger willingly. But the internet does not work like the outside world. It does not break doors or climb windows. It is already inside, whispering in the ears of the young, planting thoughts, shaping ideas, and sometimes leading them down a path that no parent would ever want their child to take. Not everything is as safe as it seems. Samir had always considered himself a reasonable father. He wasn't the overly strict type, nor was he too lenient. He believed in giving his children space while keeping an eye on their well-being. But lately, something about Aisha had been bothering him. It started with small things. She was always on her phone, even during family time. She had stopped watching TV with them, preferring to stay in her room with the door shut. Whenever Samir passed by, he would notice the way she quickly minimized her screen or turned her phone face down. At first, he ignored it. Teenagers valued their privacy, and he didn't want to be the kind of father who constantly invaded his daughter's space. But then came the mood swings. One evening, he casually asked Aisha how her day at school had been. Instead of her usual cheerful response, she snapped, "Why do you always ask me that?" and stormed off. Samir was taken aback. That wasn't like her at all. She had always been a polite, well-mannered girl. What had changed? He mentioned it to Sarah later that night. "Have you noticed Aisha acting differently lately?" he asked. Sarah sighed, barely looking up from her phone. "She's a teenager, Samir. It's normal. Hormones, stress, school pressure. It's just a phase." But it didn't feel like just a phase. Aisha had always been a little reserved, but now she seemed distant, almost as if she were living in another world. Some nights Samir would wake up in the middle of the night and see the light from her room still on. When he knocked, she would mumble, "I'm studying." But he had a feeling that wasn't true. One night he quietly opened the door just enough to peek inside. Aisha was sitting in bed, her face lit up by her phone screen. She had headphones on, completely lost in whatever she was watching. Samir watched for a moment, debating whether to say something. But he didn't. He just closed the door and walked away, an uneasy feeling growing inside him. A few days later, as he sat in his office, he found himself searching online. How to know if your teenager is hiding something. The articles he read didn't comfort him. If anything, they made him more worried. The signs were all there: secrecy, mood swings, withdrawing from family, and excessive phone use. Something was seriously wrong. He just didn't know what it was yet. Aisha had never thought of herself as someone who would get lost in the digital world. At first, social media was just a way to stay connected with friends, to scroll through endless videos, and to laugh at memes. But then, one evening, she stumbled upon something different, something that didn't just entertain her, but spoke to her in a way nothing else had before. It started with a post, a discussion about how society controls people, how rules are meant to keep individuals weak, and how only those who wake up can see the truth. The comments were filled with people who seemed so sure of themselves, who spoke with a confidence that made her doubt everything she had been taught. One of them had written, "You feel different, don't you? Like you don't belong. That's because they programmed you to be just another follower. But you don't have to be." The words struck something inside her. She had always felt a little out of place, like no one truly understood her. School was tiring, her parents were overbearing, and the world felt too predictable. But these people, they saw things differently. They spoke about real freedom, about questioning everything, about rejecting the lies fed to them since childhood. Curious, she clicked on the user's profile and found a private group link. Without much thought, she joined. Inside, it was like stepping into another world. The group was filled with discussions, videos, and messages that made her question everything. They talked about breaking free from society's expectations, about being truly independent, about how people who followed rules were sheep. At first, it was thrilling, like she had discovered a secret only a few people knew about. She started spending more time in the group, reading posts late into the night. The more she absorbed, the more her mindset shifted. She started believing that her teachers were just part of a system designed to keep students obedient, that her parents were blind, following traditions without questioning them, that the world was not what it seemed. Slowly, she began pulling away from her family. She stopped talking to her father as much, dismissing his questions as unnecessary. When her mother asked her to spend time with them, she rolled her eyes, thinking, "They just don't get it." Her real connection now was with the group. The members encouraged her to challenge everything she had been taught. They praised her when she pushed back against authority, telling her she was waking up. The validation felt good, better than anything she had received from school, friends, or even her own parents. What Aisha didn't realize was how much they were changing her. She wasn't just questioning things. She was starting to believe that anyone who disagreed with her was part of the problem. She became more aggressive, more defensive, more convinced that she was right and everyone else was wrong. And the group? They encouraged it. Because the more she trusted them, the less she trusted her own family. And that was exactly what they wanted. Sarah had always believed in giving her children space. She trusted Aisha. She was a good girl, responsible and intelligent. But lately, something about her daughter felt different. She had become distant, moody, and secretive. The warmth in her voice had been replaced by irritation. The laughter they used to share was gone. At first, Sarah had dismissed it as normal teenage behavior. But one evening, as she passed by Aisha's room, she saw something that made her pause. Her daughter was sitting on her bed, staring at her phone screen, completely lost in it. The glow from the screen reflected on her face, making her look almost haunted. Something inside Sarah told her to pay closer attention. Later that night, when Aisha was asleep, Sarah saw her daughter's phone lying on the bedside table. For a moment she hesitated. She had never invaded Aisha's privacy before. But the unease in her heart was too strong to ignore. She picked up the phone and unlocked it. What she saw made her blood turn cold. There were messages from an unknown group chat, dozens of them. Some were filled with strange philosophical discussions, but others were more alarming. "You're almost ready, Aisha. You've seen the truth now. You understand what needs to be done. They'll never understand you. You don't belong with them anymore. The final test is near. Are you ready? Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Final test? What did that mean? With trembling hands, she scrolled further. The group members were discussing challenges, things that pushed the limits of fear, pain, and even life itself. Some of them spoke about proving their loyalty by cutting off all ties with their families. Others hinted at more extreme actions, things Sarah couldn't even bring herself to process. Her heart pounded. How had this happened? How had her daughter, her sweet, intelligent, beautiful daughter, fallen into something like this? Then, a new message popped up on the screen. Aisha, tomorrow is the day. It's time to prove yourself. Sarah felt a wave of panic crash over her. Whatever this was, it was happening now. She needed to wake Samir. She needed to wake Aisha. She needed to stop this before it was too late. Sarah burst into the bedroom, phone in hand, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. Samir, startled awake, sat up immediately. What happened? He asked, concern etched on his face. Sarah could barely form the words. She handed him Aisha's phone, her hands shaking. Read this, she whispered. Samir scrolled through the messages, his face growing pale with each line. The words final test burned into his mind. His heart pounded as a terrifying realization sank in. This wasn't just a phase. Their daughter was in serious danger. Without hesitation, they rushed to Aisha's room. Samir banged on the door. Aisha, open up now. After a few seconds, the door creaked open. Aisha stood there, groggy but irritated. What is it? She muttered. Samir held up her phone. What is this, Aisha? Who are these people? Her eyes flickered with shock for just a moment before she crossed her arms, her expression hardening. You went through my phone? She snapped. That's a complete violation of my privacy. Aisha, this is serious, Sarah pleaded. These people, these so-called friends, are manipulating you. They're pushing you into something dangerous. Aisha scoffed. You don't understand. They actually get me. They don't treat me like a child. They respect me, unlike you two. Samir's voice was firm. They don't respect you, Aisha. They're using you. They want you to do something terrible. She shook her head, stepping back. No, you want to control me. You just want me to live the way you want, follow your rules, and never think for myself. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Aisha, that's not true. We love you. We're trying to protect you. But Aisha wasn't listening. The words of the online group echoed in her mind. They will try to stop you. They don't want you to be free. They are part of the system. At that moment, her phone buzzed. She glanced down and saw a new message. Don't let them stop you. You're stronger than this. You know what you need to do. Aisha's grip tightened on her phone. Her parents were the enemy now. She needed to get away. Samir and Sarah exchanged a worried glance. They could see it. Aisha wasn't just arguing. She was losing herself to these people. Samir took a deep breath. They couldn't afford to waste time arguing. If they didn't act now, they might lose their daughter forever. Aisha lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her heart pounding. The message had been clear. Tonight is the night. Be ready. Her parents didn't understand. They never would. But the group, her real family, believed in her. They had opened her eyes to the truth. And now it was time to prove herself. At exactly midnight, she slid out of bed, careful not to make a sound. She had already packed a small bag, just a hoodie, her phone, and a few essentials. Her heart raced as she tiptoed past her parents' bedroom, holding her breath. The house was silent. Perfect. She unlocked the front door, stepped outside into the cold night air, and hurried toward the street. The group had given her an address, a location where she would finally take the final step to free herself from the chains of her old life. As she walked, her phone buzzed. You're almost there. Just a little further. Don't look back. She followed the instructions blindly, her mind clouded with excitement and fear. The streetlights cast eerie shadows as she made her way to an abandoned park on the outskirts of the city. Her hands trembled as she reached the meeting point. A figure stood waiting, a tall man in a dark hoodie. He didn't say a word, just nodded and motioned for her to follow. Aisha hesitated. This was it. She had imagined this moment so many times, but now that she was here, an uneasy feeling crept up her spine. "Are you ready?" The man finally spoke, his voice deep and unfamiliar. She swallowed hard and nodded. But just as she took a step forward, the sound of screeching tires tore through the silence. "Aisha!" She spun around. It was her father's voice. A car had pulled up, and before she could react, Samir jumped out, his face filled with panic. Sarah was right behind him, tears streaming down her face. "Aisha! Step away from him!" Samir shouted, his voice shaking. The hooded man stiffened. "Who are they?" he hissed. "They're no one," Aisha said quickly. "Just leave, I can handle this." But before she could finish, Samir ran toward her, grabbing her wrist. "We're going home," he said firmly. "No." Aisha struggled, trying to pull away. "You don't get to control me." The man in the hoodie took a step forward, his voice turning cold. "She made her choice. Let her go." Samir stood his ground. "You stay away from my daughter." For a moment there was silence. Aisha looked between her father and the stranger, her mind racing. Then the man scoffed. She was never strong enough anyway. Without another word, he turned and disappeared into the darkness. Aisha felt her knees go weak. She had been moments away from… what? She didn't even know. Sarah pulled her into a tight embrace, sobbing, "You're safe! You're safe!" Aisha wanted to fight back, to argue, but as she clung to her mother, something inside her cracked. The weight of everything she had believed, everything she had nearly done, came crashing down. Samir exhaled shakily. "Let's go home." And this time, Aisha didn't resist. Aisha sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the floor. The events of the night played over and over in her mind, the messages, the man in the hoodie, the way she had almost walked away from everything she had ever known. Her hands trembled as she clutched her phone. The group chat was still open. She was never strong enough anyway. The words burned into her heart. Just hours ago she had believed these people were her true friends, her real family. They had told her she was special, that she was different, that she was one of them. But the moment she hesitated, the moment she chose her real family over them, they discarded her like she was nothing. She had been manipulated. A wave of nausea hit her. How had she been so blind? How had she let herself fall so deep? Tears welled up in her eyes. She wasn't angry at her parents anymore. She was angry at herself. A soft knock on the door made her flinch. Samir and Sarah stepped inside, their faces etched with worry. They looked exhausted, as if they hadn't slept in days. Maybe they hadn't. Sarah sat beside her, placing a gentle hand on her back. Aisha let out a shaky breath. I almost left, her voice cracked. She buried her face in her hands. I don't know who I am anymore. Samir sat down on the other side of her. You're our daughter. That's who you are. His voice was steady, but there was pain behind it. And we love you. Aisha let out a choked sob. I was so stupid. I thought they cared about me. Sarah pulled her into a tight embrace. You're not stupid, sweetheart. You were lost. And they took advantage of that. Samir ran a hand over his face. But we should have seen it sooner. We should have paid more attention. The guilt in his voice made Aisha's chest tighten. No, she whispered. I hid it from you. I pushed you away. Sarah shook her head. We should have fought harder to pull you back. A long silence stretched between them. It was heavy, filled with regret, pain, and the weight of everything that had almost happened. Then Aisha whispered, I don't know how to fix this. Samir exhaled, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. We'll figure it out. Together. Aisha nodded slowly. For the first time in months, She let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as alone as she had thought. The days that followed were not easy. Aisha felt like she was waking up from a nightmare, one that had nearly consumed her. She deleted the group chat, blocked every member, and turned off her phone for the first time in years. But the damage wasn't so easily erased. She struggled with overwhelming guilt. Every time she looked at her parents, she saw the pain in their eyes, the silent question they didn't dare to ask. How did we almost lose you? But they didn't push her. Instead, they focused on helping her heal. Therapy became part of their routine. At first, Aisha resisted. She hated the idea of sitting in a room with a stranger, spilling out her emotions. But as the sessions continued, she realized how much she had bottled up. Her loneliness, her frustrations, her desperate need to feel understood. The therapist helped her unravel everything piece by piece until she finally saw how easily she had been manipulated. Her parents also made changes. They didn't just tell her to stay away from bad people. They learned alongside her. They read about online safety, attended parenting workshops, and, most importantly, created an open space for conversation. They didn't just ask, "How was your day?" anymore. They asked, "How are you feeling?" And they truly listened. Samir and Sarah also had to confront their own guilt. They had trusted Aisha, but realized trust didn't mean complete disconnection. They started monitoring her online presence, not in a way that invaded her privacy, but in a way that kept the door open for discussion. Aisha, too, changed. She no longer saw her parents as enemies, but as people who had always wanted the best for her. It took time, but she started to rebuild her bond with them. She joined family dinners again, left her phone in another room when they talked, and slowly, laughter returned to their home. One evening, as she sat with her parents watching an old family video, she realized how close she had come to losing all of this. She looked at her father and mother and whispered, "I'm sorry." Samir smiled gently. "You don't have to be sorry. Just promise us one thing." Aisha met his eyes. "What?" "That if you ever feel lost again, you'll talk to us, no matter what." A tear slipped down her cheek, but this time, it wasn't from sadness, it was from relief. "I promise." In a world where technology is woven into every part of life, the internet is no longer just a tool, it's an entire world. A world where children, even those from the most loving and stable homes, can get lost. Aisha's story is not unique. Every day, teenagers are drawn into online spaces that promise belonging, understanding, and freedom. Sometimes these spaces are harmless, but sometimes they are traps, designed by people who know exactly how to manipulate young minds, how to make them question everything, and how to pull them away from their families. Many parents believe, "My child would never fall for something like this." But the truth is, any child can be vulnerable. So, what can parents do? Know what your child is doing online. This doesn't mean spying, but it does mean staying involved. Who are they talking to? What platforms are they using? What kind of content are they consuming? Keeping an open dialogue about their online life is just as important as asking about their school life. Create a safe space for conversation. Children and teens need to feel like they can talk to their parents without fear of punishment or judgment. If they believe they will just get in trouble, they will turn to others, often the wrong people, for advice and support. Teach critical thinking. Instead of just saying, "Don't talk to strangers online," help them understand how manipulation works. Teach them to question when someone online is pushing them towards secrecy or extreme beliefs. Set digital boundaries. There's a difference between trust and complete digital freedom. Setting reasonable limits on screen time, ensuring devices are used in shared spaces, and using parental controls can all help protect children without making them feel suffocated. Watch for changes in behavior. Secrecy, mood swings, isolation, sudden distrust of family. These can be warning signs. If something feels off, don't ignore it. Educate yourself. The online world changes fast. Parents need to stay updated on trends, apps, and potential dangers. The more informed you are, the better you can guide your child. The most important thing? Don't wait until it's too late. Aisha was lucky. She had parents who fought for her, who refused to give up on her even when she pushed them away. But many stories don't end this way. If you're a parent, the time to act is now. Not with fear, not with control, but with awareness, involvement, and love. Because in the battle for your child's future, the most powerful weapon you have is you. Aisha sat by her bedroom window, looking out at the world she had almost left behind. The thought sent a shiver down her spine. She had always believed she was in control, that she was making her own choices. But the truth was far more terrifying. She had been manipulated little by little until she no longer recognized herself. I almost lost myself. The words echoed in her mind. If her parents hadn't found her in time, if they hadn't fought for her, she didn't even want to think about how the story would have ended. She picked up her phone, scrolling through her contacts. This time, instead of looking for messages from strangers, she sent one to her mother. "Can we talk?" Downstairs, Sarah's phone lit up. A second later, she and Samir were by Aisha's side, listening, truly listening as she spoke. Too many families assume their children are safe simply because they live in a good home. But danger isn't always a stranger lurking in the dark. Sometimes, it's a message on a phone screen, a whisper from the wrong person at the right time, a slow pull into something dangerous, something that can take everything away. Parents must wake up. It's not about controlling or spying, it's about being present, being aware, being involved. It's about making sure your child never has to choose between their online world and their real family. The internet is powerful. It can educate, connect, and inspire. But it can also destroy. And too many parents realize the danger only when it's too late.